Okay, I'm live. It's a little bit dark in here. Yeah, it's a little bit dark in here, but I just woke up. Anyone that deals with CPTSD, some days are good and some days are not so great. Some days for some people are horrifying. Generally in the morning, I wake up pretty happy, but then there are days when the wrong thought triggers the wrong thought. So the wrong feeling, the wrong everything. So you kind of go into a downward spiral and your morning starts off shitty. Well, this morning, my morning kind of started off shitty because I fell asleep with TV on, first of all. And I woke up like several times throughout the night. And then when I woke up this morning, what was I thinking about? And I was thinking about something, but it led me to start thinking about, okay, who do I place blame on? My family focuses a lot on getting answers about like why I want my diagnosis, why what I expect to get from my I don't need a professional diagnosis. Honestly, I can still get the same services that I'm seeking without getting a professional diagnosis. Like seriously, my medical information is protected, and all I have to do is explain to these people that the people I've seen have been grossly misdiagnosed. It's obvious that if these services are helping me, if the services I'm if the services I want to receive and may receive, I'm really not seeking any services right now except for to gain justice for my children. The rest I'm doing on my own. Like the only purpose of my video, what's the purpose of your diagnosis, was to help other people not be pressured by anyone saying, oh, well, where's your diagnosis, and wanting a professional diagnosis. Don't let people do that to you. If it's not anything you need, then don't get it just for them. Because self-diagnosis, we know ourselves better than other people know us. And many times we know ourselves better than doctors know us. And my bipolar and borderline personality or whatever other bullshit ass diagnosis they've given me so far is obvious that I know myself better than they do. And I went to school to be an MHRT. I'm not saying I'm clinical. I'm not clinically. I'm not saying I'm at a professional level where I can go out and diagnose and prescribe and all kinds of shit. No, but I know myself well enough and my symptoms well enough. And I've researched the disorders enough to know I am not bipolar. I am not bipolar. I do not have borderline personality. I do have a bad habit of suspecting others of having some of these disorders, and that's wrong of me to do. So, because I am not qualified to diagnose anyone, I do observe behaviors pretty well. Like with my mother and so on and so forth. Sometimes her behaviors tend to lean in a certain direction. I don't know that my mother has a diagnosis. I don't know that she wants a diagnosis. I obviously she thinks everything she handles and the way she handles it is fine. So that's another reason I had to decide my mom is a toxic person to me. That's because she's not able to see or understand that there's a big issue. There's a big issue when I become toxic to people. I do my best to figure out why. I do my best to communicate and help them help me understand where my behavior is wrong. And there's plenty of people that can tell you that. Plenty of people that did interact with me on a personal level, and plenty of people that, okay, yes, sometimes I do lose not my temper, but I do just cut myself off from people or jump to conclusions, but then I come back around when everyone's cool, calm, and collected, and we figure things out. But that being said, I don't know, CPTSD, it just rears its ugly head whenever it wants to. Like you think the wrong thing and it's a trigger, or you see the wrong thing and it's a trigger. You smell the wrong thing and it's a trigger. And then your mind just gets stuck in this cycle of like reviewing what the flip happened to you. Why did it happen to you? How did you let it happen? How could you let that happen? How could anybody let that happen? Your mind goes through a billion. I can't stress enough that Mark and Rinda Smith, they and family tree counselors, they have videos that helped me understand exactly what the F I was going through. Narcissistic abuse syndrome is pretty much the same thing as CPTSD. But it's yeah. Anywho, what did I get on here for? Oh, everyone's focusing on the wrong thing. I want justice for my kids. As far as me getting resources and treatment and all that goes, None of my behaviors are really destructive. None of my behaviors are destructive. None of my behaviors are at this point. So it's not that I need treatment. I just needed management of my sleep, which I've gotten. I'm looking for a job or deciding what to go to school for. So as far as my attention goes, even if it does become a problem, I'm sure diet is what I will need to attend to first. So when I'm looking for treatment and resources, my aunt asked me this. I'm not looking for a specific treatment or resource. I'm looking for a supportive set of people, a community that I can be a part of that will understand my limits and not keep pushing me or not keep claiming I have all these bad behaviors because they understand what my behaviors are and why they are the way they are sometimes, and what to do to help me keep them from getting to the point where they're not acceptable or they're destructive. And that's what people are failing to understand. It's not like I'm out there seeking some treatment or I don't need any treatment for any of my behaviors right now. I'm not abusive to my child. I'm not neglectful to my child. I'm completing my duties as a mother, doing the best I can. Okay. My parenting style might be different. It is much different than most people's. But that's my choice. That's my choice. Like, seriously, I've had so much intervention from CPS and other people based on their opinion that my choices are not acceptable, when it's a matter of opinion and a matter of law that I am allowed my opinion and I am allowed my choice. That's a matter of law. And if my choices and my decisions are not hurting my children, my child, at this point, it's just my child. Well, then who the hell are they to say just because they don't think it's okay that they have the right to intervene? That's what's been happening all of the time. But that's irrelevant. As far as my wanting a diagnosis and treatment, it's more that I'm longing for a community that I can belong to, that will understand my limits and respect those limits and not push me to the point where my behaviors become unacceptable. Because once I get to a certain point, or once certain things are so overwhelming, and once certain senses are overloaded. See, when you're in a community of people with the same issues as you, they tend to understand more when you do start to get upset, or when you do walk away without saying anything, or when you do raise your voice every now and then, or snap at someone. They understand and they don't take it personal. Because when people take things like that personal, and it's not anything we control, or even sometimes it's not things we even notice, and if people don't bring it to our attention the right way, then we start to tear ourselves down. We start to get a low self-esteem because we're so horrible. We're such horrible people that can't control ourselves. We're such horrible people that have bad attitudes. We're such horrible people that can't do anything to please anyone else, because everything we say is said with the wrong tone, or everything we do is done with the wrong attitude. And it's really not anything anybody should be shunned or isolated for or ignored. And I think the quiet treatment is the worst treatment to give anybody. Like, seriously, you're such bad person that I'm not even going to interact with you, is the message that I get when people do that to me. It's extremely hurtful. People don't realize that I'm such a horrible person that they won't even talk to me. Like, really? That's an unacceptable thing for me. When me and my daughter get silent and separate, it's not that we're ignoring each other. We're allowing each other time to gather ourselves. And it's not ever for an extended amount of time, much more than 10, 15 minutes. We don't ever give each other the silent treatment or ignore each other intentionally just because I don't appreciate your behavior. I don't approve of your behavior. No, that's not going to solve anything. It's not. It's a flaw in what some parents have. Because, and I'm going to be honest, that's what my mother told me. That's why the silence, because I was having these these abusive behaviors towards them and whatever. And okay, no, but she couldn't explain to me what. And she said the posts you were making, but I was okay. But what posts are you talking about? And then she brought up articles that I had posted with my opinion of her parenting style, and because she was offended by the description, she feels that was abusive because I was saying the family was void of love. And no, that was in the article. It did express that some families that use that type of parenting style appeared to be void of love, but if she had read the whole article, it wasn't saying that I was saying my family was void of love and blah, 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 blah. No, it was saying some of the possibilities, some of the families displayed, some of the situations were this. And rather than understanding and accepting the constructive aspect of it, she picked it apart and was like, oh my God, you're calling me void. You're saying our family was void of love. And no, that's not what I was saying. But I couldn't, she was so upset about it. I couldn't even discuss that with her. I had to just sit there and listen to her pretty much belt me with, you're saying our family's void of love. You're unappreciative. You're this, you're that. Are you kidding me? And that hurt just as much as my opinion not being accepted. I mean, and then for her to turn around and tell me, and you have no right to say anything about Ray's, she called him Ray, obviously for a reason, my son, Ray Lee. You have no right to say anything about Ray Lee's suicide because we experienced that, not you. So just because I was not physically here, she doesn't believe I experienced my son's suicide. I'm still baffled as to what made my mother say that. I still don't understand who the fuck said that to me, because in my mind, my mother is not that heartless. Like, really. To me, my mother's not that heartless, but that statement was an extremely heartless statement. That all of my children will always be biologically connected to me. And there's also scientific proof of that as well. But that was a heartless statement to make, that I didn't experience it. Just because I was not here, they were the ones that experienced it, and I have no right to say anything about it. My son was raised by the same family that raised me. You can't tell me it's much different than it was when I grew up. So I know what my son went through. And that's the ground, that's the pretense, that's what gives me the right to say something. Because I was raised by the same family that my son was raised with. So I have every right to say anything that I said. Okay, I don't want to have a CPS breakdown with everybody this morning, all one of you. But yeah, I don't know. This is how I have to express myself. This is how I have to work through things and feel like I've gotten it off my chest so that I can continue through my day. And my mother doesn't appreciate it. I don't want her to be shunned or criticized or treated any differently because of my videos. Those are not my intentions at all. So please, anybody watching these that might know my mother, anybody that watches these that has contact with her, please do not use my videos to go back to her and criticize her, to start any shit with her, or to have her thinking that I'm this and I'm that and I'm that and this. If you have a concern about my video, allow her to watch it in its entirety and make her own choice. Please don't fill my mom's head full of shit. That way we can understand and understand and know the source of all these thoughts and feelings. And when they're hers, she has every right to feel them and she has every right to express them. But when there are other people placing them on her, just like I've seen her do to other people, just like I've done to other people, placing my feelings on other people, influencing their choices or decisions or feelings towards another person. I've done that, guilty of doing that in the past as well. I don't try my best not to do that now. But these are all things that can happen. So please don't use any of these videos to go criticize my family, especially my mother. These are all to express myself because I don't have an outlet of understanding people. I don't have an outlet of understanding people. And I can't just sit here and let all of this sit on my chest. This is the only way I know I put it out there and I know people can watch it. And I'm not ashamed of anything I'm saying. I'm not insulting my family. I'm just pointing out my experiences with them and helping people to understand these things can be hurtful to other people. So if you're out there doing this to one of your family members, and by doing this to one of your family members, I know it sounds accusatory, but sometimes it hurts to find out that what you're doing is hurtful or destructive to someone else. And I'm sure they can turn around and say, it's the same thing to me. But there's honestly not one behavior that I have that is destructive. No one will point that out to me. And just like with the CPS case, just like with my CPS case with my kids, what choice did I make that warranted them taking my children? No one can give me an answer. No one can give me an answer. You can't remove children because someone made bad choices. That's illegal. That's what nobody's understanding. For probably 18, okay, how old would my daughter be that passed away? Okay, after my daughter passed away, that's when my CPS case opened. Not right after, but later on after, when I had my son. I had a child in between, no one bothered us. And then I had my son, and they had a concern because I had an infant that died. And that's when CPS jumped in and took my son, refused to even let me take him home from the hospital. That's when my CPS case began, because a nurse had a concern. But the nurse didn't even stop to think the baby in between the one that passed away and my son, which was Leasia. Asia Lee's the one that passed away. Leasia was on monitors for the first 3 months of her life because I was petrified that she was going to die in her sleep. Nobody knows these things because nobody asked. The nurse was concerned. Why? Concerned about neglect and abuse. It's obvious with the second one, she was on monitors for 3 months, so it was obvious a concern. There's obviously no neglect. Obviously something that was causing me anxiety. Anyhow, yeah. No one can give me an answer. No one can give me an answer how my choice is. What choice did I make to lose my children? I wasn't abusing them. I wasn't neglecting them. I was not addicted to drugs. There's not one dirty drug test anywhere. There's not one drug arrest anywhere. None. My family's asking, so my other family's asking me, well, why would they harass you? And they do this to a lot of people. They do this to a lot of people, and nobody realizes that. It's an injustice. It's wrong, and it's destroying families. It's destroying children before they become adults. It's causing them to be dysfunctional, much more dysfunctional than I even am. I'm not destined to be dysfunctional if I just find the right job and the right people to nurture and understand, to nurture me and my strengths and to understand my limits, because I do have some limits that need to be respected. And then there are limits that most people don't have, or a lot of people don't have. I'm not gonna say most, but some of my limits are limits that other people don't have. And there are going to be times where I need a little bit of exception and understanding. Okay, right at the moment, I have to do this. I have to walk away from the situation. I need to be somewhere where they can understand that, or where I can be in control of that, and they can respect that. But most jobs can't do that, or won't do that. Needless to say, there's children growing up being separated from their parents, being abused and killed, abused beyond belief in CPS foster homes, abused other places, moved from a perfectly healthy home that just because, oh, well, there's substance abuse problem. Substance abuse problem has never been any reason anyone can remove. I'm not excusing anybody using substances. I don't excuse anyone being irresponsible. I don't condone using substances, alcohol included, because I've seen more people get drunk and neglect their children than I've seen anybody get high and neglect their children. I'm sick of that too. Alcohol is completely legal because it profits so much. It's such a profitable business, but it's even more addictive and destructive than half the street drugs out there, except for heroin. You can die from coming off alcohol. You can die. If you stop drinking alcohol, you could die. But it's legal. You go out there and drive, you could kill somebody. You go out there and you freaking, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. If you can't do anything you're doing responsibly and continue to supervise and care for your children. I mean, there's times I've drank. I've only drank and become intoxicated when there was another responsible adult there. I've never sat there and got drunk while my child was with me, just by herself. I've always only ever drank when another responsible adult was with me. And I've never exposed my child to any drug use. I've never exposed my child to anybody else that was using drugs or drunk. I've never exposed my child to anyone pulling a gun on me and pointing it to my head. I've never exposed my child to half the shit she's been exposed to because she was with that motherfucker in California. She told me about a time when she was standing in the driveway with his mother, and she was scared to death because someone pulled a gun on his ass. Someone pulled a gun on his ass. Scared her to death. And then he told her, oh, don't tell the police anything you saw. But you can run to the police and tell them every 5 seconds, that's my baby, that's my daughter, I need my daughter back. Oh, really? You're teaching my daughter not to tell about anything, but you're allowed to run to the police anytime you want to abduct my child from me again. Interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just having a CPSD meltdown this morning. It's not a meltdown, but I'm so overwhelmed by some of the questions that my family asks me. And this is that right now I'm talking about family, not my children. My children, I will never be overwhelmed by the questions my children ask. They always have every right to ask whatever they want, and I will never be angry at them. It will never upset me. because they're the ones that haven't been told the truth. And I understand their point of view. I understand what, well, mom and dad never gave us a reason not to trust. Why wouldn't we trust them? I am that. I completely understand. But at the same time, I've never given any of them a reason not to trust me either. They're basing their trust for me on someone else's opinion of me, on someone else's experiences with me. And they may not be accurately described or accurate even, yeah. That's what people aren't realizing. And there are some people that I've spoken to that have noticed the same thing as I have. And that's that someone keeps saying everyone remembers everything different, but this person is the one that is 9 times out of 10, the one that's remembering everything wrong. But we're always the ones that are wrong. We're always the ones remembering everything different. This is the one person that controls the behavior, believe it or not. And I'm going to go out there on a limb and express this. This one person controls everybody's behavior in my immediate family. And by immediate family, I mean my mother, my stepfather, and my children. I can't say anything about whether they control my sister or brother's behavior because my sister and brother are completely separate from them. And I don't really communicate with my sister and brother that much either. I don't know if that's because they're upset with me or not. It's probably just because they're busy with their own lives. And I don't really reach out to them as much as I was trying to reach out to my family. But I think that's because I don't really reach out to any. So I'm not upset with them either, my sister or my brother. But there's one person in the circle of my mom, my dad, and my children that everyone pussyfoots around her. Everyone, like, and I hate to say this. I'm out there on a limb by saying this. I hate to say this, but my stepdad even will come out there and save situations because he sees conflict about to arise. And he's like, well, the reason it's being remembered like it, because I'll remember something differently than she does. And it's really bullshit. That doesn't matter. Like when something happened or where we lived when something happened. It's stuff that's irrelevant. Like, and I've already learned, I'll argue it the first time. No, it was this way. And then no, it was this way. I thought it was this way because of this. No, it was this way because of this. And then usually I'll drop it. Because if you haven't won after the second time of helping her remember, you're not going to. You're not going to. And so that's one of my behaviors that kind of just, but it's irrelevant shit most of the time. But my stepdad does the same thing. Like he'll just be like, well, no, the only reason it could be confusing is because of this and that and this and this. And then I'm like, okay, now you're just covering everyone's ass, so we'll all shut up, which is a good tactic. He does well. I have to hand him that much. If there's anyone I ever have to argue with or need to interact with, it's my stepdad that I respect the most, believe it or not. And that's the one that everyone's been insinuated or been convinced that I have problems with. And I don't. I don't have problems with my stepdad. I love my stepdad just as much as I love my dad. I learned a lot from my stepdad. If you're anyone that listens to some of my videos or maybe talks to me on a daily basis, wait, maybe do I even share these with people? But there's a lot of things throughout the day that I will express that I learned from my stepdad. Like, let's see, the whole no thing. What's the worst anyone can say? No. My stepdad taught me that. A lot of my behaviors, my sarcastic and funny behaviors and attitudes, I got those from my stepdad. And I don't hold anything against him because I do understand at this point that whatever happened between us was nothing that was ever discussed appropriately, or there was a very huge lack of communication between all of us. And nothing ever, there were never, okay. I'm not going to go into specifics because it was me and my sister and my parents at first, and then it turned out to be just me. And then later on, when I was not in the family, I was in another kind of care. I was outside of the home. Then they had their issues between them. Now, I know nothing about the issues that they had between them, and I won't comment on those. I've heard, but I won't comment because I don't know facts. I can only go by what I've heard, and that's not acceptable for me to share that. But what I went through with my parents was simply a lack of communication. And my mother, I understandably being defensive of our family and my stepfather. I guess her own irrational fear that something was going to come of it. Something was going to come of what she was in her own mind blowing out of proportion, rather than trying to understand my perspective and my point of view. I never pressed any charges on my stepfather for anything. All I my only intentions of bringing it forward was to gain understanding of why I felt certain ways about certain things. And that's just one part of it. And the other part of it was me being disciplined the way I was disciplined. I didn't appreciate that. And no one was willing to even budge on that one or even conversate about it. Like, I was extremely uncomfortable with the way that I was being disciplined. And they'll be the first to tell you, well, being spanked isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. If it's not anything you can do to an adult, it shouldn't be anything you can do to a child who's not as emotionally equipped to understand why they're being spanked. Like, that's what I don't understand is we expect children to learn all these lessons, and we're teaching them from an adult perspective. Like, this is how an adult would gain submission from another adult or an animal, not a kid. I don't get it. And I don't understand why sometimes they don't understand my perspective when there's like years of research backing it. But then as soon as I show that research, it's an attack on my family. It's not ever meant to be an attack on my family. It's only been meant to be a form of enlightenment to help them understand, okay, these are the behaviors you were taught as when you were a kid. This is how you were disciplined when you were a kid. And okay, maybe it didn't affect you in an extreme degree. But research has shown that it's very few and far between that are actually not. And it's obvious that there's still some sort of family dynamics that have been damaged because that was the way you were raised, because you're still unwilling and unable to see that once you gain that knowledge and you have the ability to see where it's wrong, but you still want to sit there and defend it. That's just blatant ignorance. That's ignorance. Like, seriously. And then by turning it around on me saying that I'm attacking the family and saying that they were void of love, and they're just picking and choosing out of the article what you wanted to. That wasn't sitting and reading the whole article and getting what you're supposed to get from it. And that's not anything I can force you to do. But I'm not going to sit here and be accused of being abusive or accusatory when I'm just presenting facts on research. If this shoe doesn't fit, don't wear it. If you don't feel like your if my family and my parents and my mom specifically doesn't feel like that wasn't their parenting style, then why is she so offended by it? All she has to do is say, no, that's really not our parenting style. That's really not how you were raised. Okay, well, I'm the one that experienced it. I was the child. That experienced it. You were the parent. We don't always see our behaviors and how destructive they are until it's brought to our attention or until we get the perspective of someone else. Now, see, people don't realize in California, when I went to mental health, I was forced to go to mental health. My abuser went to my mental health appointment. My abuser, Jeffrey Martin Miller, was sitting right next to me. And the nurse told me, let him explain. Because when you're the person going through, when you're the person going through the episode, you're not always rational enough to understand or remember your behavior correctly. So they were taking his point of view and his idea of my behaviors for my treatment. Sometimes it's better to get the third person's perspective because they're the ones that actually see the behavior from a calm and rational. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? See, they don't understand. This is what I've been dealing with all these years. And so now I don't want to do the same thing to them, but I want them to understand that I was the child being parented, and children don't run away for no reason. Children don't just get a wild hair up their ass and decide to be difficult. So either there is a neurological disorder present or there was abuse. Kids don't just run away from their only safe place for no reason. That's the part everyone's missing. And I don't say any of this to be critical. I don't say any of this to be mean, just for us to get an understanding of what we went through and grow from it and get closer as a family again, rather than that always being a resentment in the back of our heads because we still don't understand it. And that's what's happening is my mom and maybe not my stepdad. He doesn't seem to be anyone that's dwelling on anything. Like, he's really just the peacekeeper at this point. And I think that's upsetting for me because he has just as much to offer the family as the rest of us do. And those of us that are being isolated and those of us that are isolating themselves, I mean, we all have something to offer our family. And it's time that we sit down and understand. And if we can't get an understanding of everything that happened, we need to agree and accept that there's nothing we can do about that now, and that we're all different people, and we need to give each other a new chance to start from the beginning. Stop setting boundaries and limits, saying, well, don't do this and don't do that. Okay, that's toxic for me to not express myself. I'm not verbally abusing anyone. I have a right to speak. I have a right to my opinion. And if I can't say it to you, then how am I supposed to get it out there? I'm just supposed to sit here with it on my chest until I explode? No. This way I know it's been said, and it's obvious that people are running back to my mother to tell her whatever. This way I know it's being said, and it's documented, and there's a video of it. So no one can go back and run and say, oh, Amber said this to me and Amber said that to me. It's on video. It's on video what I said. And if we need to sit down and review it, we can. Everything I've said is on video. If we want to sit down and review it, we can. But I'm not going to sit here and say nothing, because that's very toxic to me. It's very toxic to me. And if I can't speak to my mother on terms where it's not just her and I speaking, because that's no longer acceptable for me. And that's hurtful, because she tells me that the reason they've been ignoring me is because I'm verbally abusive and all this other stuff. And for her to say what she said to me, the two things that have just pretty much been eating me alive since I've seen them, we're the ones that experienced my son. She didn't say my son. You can't say, you don't have a right to say anything about Ray's death. We're the ones that experienced that, not you. Regardless of where I was when my son killed himself, I still experienced that. When Asia Lee died, I was in the other room. I still experienced that. And I blamed myself for both. I think I have punished myself enough for both. For you to tell me that my point of view is invalid because I wasn't there is bullshit. That's bullshit. That's like me and my dad's side of the family saying, Becky, you did not experience Jeff Lumpkin's suicide because you divorced him. You were not living with him. You were not a part of his life, except for us to see him. So you had nothing to say about his suicide because you weren't a part of it. You didn't experience it. Our family did. We did. Does that even make sense? It doesn't sound right. My mother chose not to be in my father's life for whatever reason that was, valid or not. It's not for any of us to say. But if I were to tell her, you didn't experience my father's suicide. You didn't experience that. We did. I would never say that to her. And then for her to tell me I've never said thank you for anything she's done for my children. That is another, because I've repeatedly said thank you to her. And she told me, oh, no need to say thank you. We were just doing what we were told to do. That pisses me off. So you only took my kids. My kids are only my kids are your kids. You have claimed them as your kids, but you're telling me you only did what you were told to do. Well, then you didn't take my kids because you wanted to raise my kids and because you loved them. You didn't take my kids because you were a grandparent that cared for them and wanted to make sure that they were okay. You took them because you were told to. Why didn't you give them back? CPS doesn't dictate where my children live. They don't dictate where I live. My mom was under the impression that I couldn't live with her because my kids were there. Who the fuck is CPS? That's what I don't understand. My parents, my mom specifically, is under the impression that CPS has some sort of power. They abuse their power every day. My kids even have the idea that CPS never has the right to interfere in anybody's life unless you are going to charge a parent with a crime, such as neglect or abuse. Unless you are going to charge them with that crime, you cannot interfere in their parenting. You cannot. You cannot remove their children just because they're on drugs or have a positive drug test, unless you're going to charge them with a crime, abuse or neglect. You cannot interfere. That's what they don't understand. And no one can no one can answer my question. What choices did I make? And listen to that, choices. You cannot remove children because of choices either. Good and bad choices are a matter of opinion. What crime did I commit against my children? I didn't ever commit a crime against my children. And my baby that passed away, I'm almost positive that there was medical neglect and that they failed to realize my RH factor is exactly why my child passed away. Every indication is there. The swelling, the unexplained swelling, all of that. The only one carried to term, Her heart rate went all the way down when I was giving birth. All the factors were there, all the stress factors, all the Rh negative factors. I did smoke cigarettes. That was probably the worst idea in the whole fucking world, but I was under a lot of stress. I was being abused. I was not in a good situation at all. But no one was willing to understand that and help me. And when they were, I was brainwashed by my abuser or whoever, and I ended up leaving. So it's my fault because I didn't understand the dynamics of protecting myself. Needless to say, just because I made the wrong decisions doesn't mean I deserve to lose my kids, because that destroys lives. That's when harm reduction is not even harm reduction. It's the risks of what they're doing are far more detrimental than what the child is experiencing. CPS needs to be dismantled and eradicated. I think it needs to be dismantled and eradicated. It's just a way for them to just put their nose in people's business and think that they have the right to do it. And Constitution, and they go to court and they get warrants for, they claim there's evidence. They claim, that's what happened through my whole case in California. They claimed this evidence and claimed that the only evidence on file in the juvenile case or in the family law case, the only evidence on file was Jeffrey Martin Miller's testimony, ever. That's the only evidence that's ever been on file. And bullshit-ass lies made up by the caseworker, claiming that Linnea's real father didn't rise to the level of presumed father. You're not a judge, CPS caseworker. You're not a judge. So you putting all that jargon in the paperwork like you're a judge so you can pass it off through another judge, making it look like another judge said that. Bullshit. Because Alan Robinson proved paternity. He wasn't even out of prison when they said this about him. They hadn't even spoken with him yet, but they put in the report that he called multiple times during the interview, interrupting. He was in prison. He didn't call except for one time to speak to the CPS worker, and then the calls after that were Anthony Richmond, the person I lived with, making sure that everything was okay. Don't sit there and make us look shitty because we take care of each other. Do not make us look shitty because we have concern and care for each other, and we know when anxiety is present and around. Anthony was a very attentive man. He was a very good man, and he loved and cared about me to the point where he knew I was under a lot of stress when that caseworker was there, and so he checked on me. And that bitch turned around and used that as, oh, well, he interrupted the CPS meeting, and then more than saying it was AJ when it wasn't even AJ. AJ was in prison, called one time collect to speak to her, and then the other 4 times were Anthony, making sure that I was okay and that the CPS worker made it. These motherfuckers, you guys have no idea what they did to our family. No idea. And my mom's failing to see that. She's failing to understand. And then my other kids, they're ill-informed. They really are ill-informed. And it's a shame. I want justice for my kids. Not even for me. I don't need compensation. My children deserve compensation because they've been deprived of their mother. And it's whether they realize it's affecting them now or not, it's going to affect them. It's affecting them. It has been affecting them. It's always affected them. And in the future, it just might become more evident because they're still young adults. So it might be difficult to see how they've been affected negatively yet, because even with other disorders and such, it doesn't show up in most children, like spanking. Detrimental results to spanking don't show up until between 2 and 4 years after the child's been spanked in behavioral problems. I'm just saying. Okay, so enough of my rant and rave. I don't want to wake my daughter up. It's fucking Saturday. God. Oh, and anyone else that has any problems with my daughter cussing, my child cusses because words are meant for expression. I do my best not to allow her to cuss in front of other children because, first of all, I don't want them to go home and get spanked for repeating her, and not to cuss in front of other adults because they can be offended by it. And if it's not necessary to say it, you don't have to say it and be disrespectful to someone's opinion or preference. So I try to teach her that, but she does online cuss a lot. And she knows I don't condone verbal abuse. She knows that's unacceptable. So saying, oh my God, fuck this. Oh, what the fuck? Stuff like that. God damn it. All that shit really is not offensive to me at all. And please don't take offense to it. They're words meant for expression. But when any word can be used to abuse a person, like my mother never cussed at me. And a lot of the things she said to me are more hurtful and disrespectful, in my opinion, than any cuss word she could have ever slang at me. So please try to be understanding and accepting of my parenting choices, because they are my parenting choices and nobody has the right to interfere. Thank you. Everybody have a lovely day. I'm going to try to be happier from now on for the rest of the day. I don't know. I'm just going to try not to go out there and do anything very ridiculous, which probably shouldn't be a problem. But anywho, everyone go be happy. I'm going to try. We have some coffee, some cereal, and get over it.